Welcome at the last presentation, today's highlight. Smuggler. When you see all these people, what do you see?
They all look like me now.
Exactly.
Mission accomplished.
Smuggler and Frank, they started to wear a mask many years before it was cool.
And all we had to do is pay
now
the
you
Chinese.
Now you can see. Thanks to COVID, we have like a better anonymity set.
Yes. I'm thankful, and you look beautiful.
So short information for all those people who don't know Smuggler. Smuggler is a crypto-anarchist, cypherpunk from Germany. Together with Frank Braun, they have many common projects. The recent one is called Cypherpunk Bitstream Podcast. And it's the best, like a crypto-anarchistic podcast I know. Strongly recommended to check this podcast. And on this podcast, you had a lot of interesting talks about black market. For example, it was you. I read the paper about drop agents.
Okay.
And drop agents is a pretty unique concept. And I think in your presentation, black market logistics, you will explain exactly what is it. So welcome here, Smuggler.
Thank you. Hello, and if you're expecting any jokes, I'm not making any jokes today because Frank told me that I have new humor, so it will be only content. Blame him. So today I'm going to talk about black market logistics because the best way to fix the state is to circumvent it. And why talk about logistics in general? You know, there are many topics, but what does make logistics important? Well, there's this thing that the state injects itself into processes between us and other people all the time. And you have easy thing like money, you know, Bitcoin, we use that to help a little bit with the topic. We have that with communication. We have anonymizing communication, Tor, I2P, and stuff like that. And then there are two aspects that are really difficult to solve, and that is the state's involvement with territory and the state's involvement with logistics and trade. And since I like to think about things that make me freer and maybe somebody else freer, logistics is my topic for this year. So what are the goals of this talk that I'm giving? So number one, I just want to celebrate the ingenuity that a lot of black market logistics operators have. I want to help people to understand what the reality of black market logistics is. Because one thing I noticed when coming here is there were a lot of people like saying, oh, we're in this big totalitarian thing, what do we do now with COVID and borders are closed and everything. We're doomed, you know, but there's black market logistics might help with that and give you a little bit of hope. Then I would like to inspire innovation because black market logistics is something that most hackers and engineers never think about, but it's an interesting problem field. And then the whole question of black market logistics has systematic consequences, because if you can control logistics, it's a little bit less of state in our life. And the whole talk will be given as art performance for educational purposes. So I'm the character of Smuggler, a black market logistics consultant. But of course, it's only educational. I'm not giving any actual advice. Consult your lawyers before you do anything. The talk has 4 aspects. We'll talk about the context and key factors of logistics in general. We're talking about a few classical methods that are used, the main risks and threats to black market logistics, and a little bit of awesome future technology that is not that far in the future. So let's begin. What is logistics? Logistics is the management of flow of resources from the point of origin to the point of consumption according to the requirements of the consumer or merchant. Get something from A to B. When you want something from A to B, that is logistics. And in a black market logistics is if that environment through which you transport your goods is hostile, meaning that people want to intercept your goods or manipulate them, destroy them or poison them or stuff like that. So in logistics, there are a few key factors that determine if you're doing your job well. The first one is reliability, and that is actually the main focus of logistics is reliability. And that is, you want a defined quantity, defined quality, at a defined time, at a defined place. If you're not able to define those 4 things and accomplish them, then you're not in logistics, but in random distribution. The second thing is cost, of course. If you want to bring every single sample to the customer's door directly from the producer, the cost of transport will be so high that you cannot ship anything anymore. And that is why we have unit loads, which means that we try to fulfill as many orders as possible with one action. And that drives the per unit costs down. That explains why most logistic networks are hub and spoke networks. So you concentrate shipments to a certain point, you create a unit load out of it, you ship it somewhere else, and then you split it up again. That is how parcels work, for example. And then in a hostile environment, you have the probability of detection and the cost of intercept. That is the thing that is different from white market logistics. In white market logistics, nothing happens ever. In black market logistics, you have actors that want to get your goods. They have to detect them for that. And then even if they detect it, they still have to get it. So detection and interception is actually not the same thing. And why is that important? I'm actually not talking about drug shipments here. There are a lot of reasons why smuggling is useful. Number one, the military is doing it all the time. You need that in war. You win a war with logistics, including logistics where the enemy is trying to undermine your logistics. Then intelligence agencies do it all the time. You do it in the context of anti-piracy. That is actually where the white market logistics and black market logistics intersect. Sometimes you have high-value goods that you don't want to fall into the hands of pirates. And then you're using smuggling techniques to prevent that, among other things. During the Corona, COVID, whatever pandemic thing, we had a lot of states that were reintroduced to the concept of piracy because a lot of PPE shipments, like masks, whatever, were intercepted by pass-through states. So the Germans did that a couple of times. They stole the masks from the Swiss people and stuff like that. So they should have used a little bit more black market techniques. The Swiss people, I mean, not the Germans. And then black market logistics are always important for anti-totalitarian states. Because imagine you're in a totalitarian state that is preventing certain medication to come to you, like heart medication. And you need smugglers to survive. And that is actually where my love for the subject comes from, because that's what my parents did. I didn't understand it back then, but in hindsight, my parents were smugglers. Good smugglers, good ones, only like legal drugs, and then never mind. So, there are 3 key factors for the cost of interception. So if a shipment gets intercepted on black market logistics, there are three things you can lose. Of course, the goods. That hurts sometimes. But there's also people and equipment. So, and what happens in the whole scene to optimize this risk is you can either optimize for goods and equipment, or you can optimize for goods and people. I mean, you have to always optimize for goods because that's your job. But do you want to give up people or do you want to give up equipment? And the sad truth is that a lot of smuggling is optimized for equipment, meaning that people don't matter. And that leads to so-called mules being stacked in prison because they're transporting cocaine and stuff like that. So-called ant networks. And ant networks are a very inhumane way to smuggle goods because you're burning stupid people. But if you optimize for goods and people, then the interesting topic for us comes into play, that is technology. So let's see what the current methods of smuggling are. So you can smuggle in three domains, basically. You can smuggle through the air, through land, or on land, or under land. And the seas, of course, like the oceans. So current methods for air is, the easiest thing is drops. You fly from A to B with your goods, and then there's your customer below you somewhere, and you drop it out of the window, like simplified. So that is not very good for a lot of goods. You cannot drop equipment that is easy to break. Drops are often very easy to detect as well. And it's a little bit old school, so we could continue. Buckets. What is a bucket? If you have an airplane and you have a long line coming out of it with a weight, and then you circle the airplane, one thing that happens is that this weight is drawn into the middle of the circle, and it becomes static. And that means that you can lower this line down to the ground to both deliver and pick up stuff. So that is the bucket technique. The problem with the bucket technique is, the good thing is you don't need to drop your shit and break it. You don't need to land. But everybody can see that because there's stuff like radar. And if you have like a small airplane going in circles for half an hour, everybody is going to be suspicious about that. Then there's this cutout and breakout method. So when you're doing international flights, you have a flight plan and a flight manifest that basically says, I'm going from A to B, and this is my route. This is the airport I'm going to start. This is the airport I'm going to land. But in reality, that is just your announcement. It's not the law. So it means that if you decide to land somewhere else as well, you can do that. And with cutout breakouts, that actually means that you're flying from A to B and you're just taking another landing in between for refill, for example. And then you exchange your goods there. So, and that works relatively well in Africa. It doesn't work that well in Germany. So, but the main effective method for smuggling with the air today is ultralights. So ultralights are these very small, it's not an airplane, it's this very small flying thing where a person sits in. And they can fly very low, and they're very slow. But because they can fly this low, they usually don't appear on radar, for example. And ultralights are very cheap. So they're like 10 to 30,000 US dollars. Like a usual plane is a little bit more money. Ultralight is cheap. And if your pilot is less weighty than I am, you have a lot of cargo that he can carry with him. And ultralights are actually the main smuggling method by air over the Mexican-US border. It's basically ultralights with cocaine, flying north, landing in the desert, being abandoned, that's it. So ultralights. Land, because we are land people, we always think about smuggling over the land. The most common method is the concealment method. So you have a truck or whatever, you have hidden compartments maybe even in it, and you put your goods into that. And the interesting thing is that it's one of those technologies that has been specifically made illegal in most countries. So having a car that has hidden compartments is illegal in a lot of countries, including the US, Canada, and stuff like that. But it's the main method. And when you read the news, there are a lot of cases where cars are stopped and then they found a hidden compartment with €1 million in there. So relabeling. Relabeling is interesting because when you have a customs control officer looking at something, how does he know what that something is? So what you can often do is you can ship something from A to B, and when you send it out of A, you claim that it's good A, and when you ship it into B, you say it's good B. It's, for example, something that is done for trash smuggling, because trash is one of the most smuggled goods on the planet. So, for example, you would export electronics out of the EU and claim that those electronics are for sale and good. And then you come into Africa and then you relabel it as trash. And that means that in the EU, you don't have to follow any regulations. And in Africa, you don't have to pay import fees. And usually relabeling is only done for trash and stuff you want to get rid of. Switching is actually not a real concealment, or it's more a tactic. Because what happens a lot is that the police knows that you have this person on the route from A to B and he's carrying something with him. So they wait in B for that person to arrive and then they search the person. So what you want to do as a smuggler is you want to intersect that by another travel that is, for example, coming from D and wants to B. And they switch the goods or exchange the goods while traveling. It's done a lot for air travel, actually. So smuggling in air travel, you have that switching a lot because it means that the person coming from a high-risk country comes into the target country, he's searched and he has nothing. But the other person that comes from a low-risk country and comes into the target country is then actually carrying the goods. So you have those moments on the airplane where two dudes go to the toilet together, and it's not what you think. So rerouting. So because this is Hacker Congress, we already have to talk about career opportunities for hackers. Rerouting is a career opportunity for hackers. So imagine you have a shipping container and you put shit in there, like goods, and you don't want to be caught. How do you get it from A to B without filing the right reports? Easy. You hack the computers of the shipping companies in between and reroute the container. So you file the one thing, you order a certain thing, then you basically switch containers around and change their names. So that is actually something that happens quite a lot. The Dutch police is constantly looking for people that do that. And it has this nice effect that you suddenly have people that know about computers that become these masters of logistics and have to control hundreds of containers and simulate them and stuff like that. But the most common, at least when it comes to volume of good, method is rip-on, rip-off. It's about shipping containers again. And it looks like this. You have a shipping container by some legitimate seller, white market logistics, and then you go to the shipyard. You crack open the container, you put your own goods in there, you seal the container again, then let it be shipped. And in the destination, you're looking for the same container again, you break it open, take off your goods, and you go. So basically, this is cocaine, and this is underwear, I think. So this is the most common method, and it requires hackers, because you have to follow that container. You have to know when it is in a certain place. So these hackers hack the shipping company computers all the time to track containers and also to take them over. So basically they will send their own drivers there to pick up that container, then empty it out, and then send it back again. So, and that is the Mexican border. So there are more ways of going over borders, especially if you have a barrier. So the classic one is digging tunnels. Everybody has heard that. It's a high investment, and it usually fails. Then you can smuggle via trucks and trailers. It's done a lot, has a high failure rate because you cannot really do that without the driver being involved, so you're optimizing against people again. Then catapults is a real thing. You know, you have these Roman-style catapults on the Mexican side, and then you throw it over. It's very efficient. It often destroys the goods, though. And the targeting is actually not that... I mean, in theory, you could target it well with a catapult, but it's something they haven't figured out that well. So you have those 20 people running around searching for the last thing that was thrown over. So there's work to be done. But ramps it's a real thing. You build a ramp out of steel, you drive 20 cars over it, you're good to go. It's fast, efficient, unless you do the calculation wrong and your thing gets stuck on the middle of the border. Well, there's some loss involved always. I really don't like land smuggling and I don't like air smuggling. They're too, I don't know. They're not cool, you know? Sea smuggling is cool. So how do you get cocaine from South Africa to China? With a $5 million yacht. That is what almost all the cocaine comes from. It's the same thing to Australia and stuff. It's private yachts filled with cocaine, and you just hope to be not caught. And that is kind of brazen, but also not cool. Drop-offs and drop-ons. That is the classical method. It's hundreds of years old, and that is really easy. You have a big ship, international waters, illegal goods. You push the illegal goods from the big ship, and then if it's a drop-off, there's water down there, and if it's a drop-on, there's a smaller ship down there. So that's the difference between off and on. So drop-off, drop-on today is something that is really developed. I'll come to a picture of that later. But today, that actually means you have this bundle of goods and a tracker device and satellite connections and beacons and homing devices, and it's really cool, technology-wise. If you're an electronics person, there's a market, I'm just saying that. So, submersibles and semi-submersibles. If you're into bigger tools, you can build boats that float just below the waterline or that are actually diving. And that's a thing that the Colombian cartels are specialized in. They started by getting a few Russians that were in the shipbuilding industry. And when the Soviet Union fell, those people needed jobs. You build boats, right? It's just a boat. So, and then those people ran out because the survival rate is not that great. So by now, what they're doing is they're buying old construction plans for old submarines and try to rebuild them. I'm skeptical of the approach. The most common method for sea smuggling is go-fast boats. It's basically a boat that is relatively light and has far too big motors, is really fast, and you go from A to B so fast that the border patrol cannot react. And I have pictures for that because it's really advanced by now. And drags and parasites, that basically means you have a big ship, you attach your goods from the outside to the ship, let the ship go, and then you take it over again. It sounds interesting, I have pictures. That's a drop-off. So what you see here is not the smugglers, that is actually border guard. That's why there's a picture of it. That is cocaine. It's basically in all these pieces are connected so they don't drift apart. And then, do you see this little white device here? That's the homing beacon. So basically what happened is you had this big international freighter, somebody there threw the shit into the water, and then the next day or whatever, a local fisherman would have gone out there, used the homing beacon to find it, pull it in, go back to the harbor, smuggling done. Not in this case. Semi-submersibles, I'm not sure if you can really see that because it's in camouflage. So you have this little boat up here, and that boat in the water would look similar to this one. So it's just below the waterline, which means that it doesn't have a silhouette, which means that you cannot see it from another boat. You can only see it from the air. And these are like, every big cartel is, investing in that shit. So they're actually driving them. Do you drive them? Is that the right word? Yeah, okay. So you drive them from Colombia up to Washington State. So they go like, I don't know, 3,000 kilometers with those things. Imagine that. Not a job I won't have. Those are go-fast boats. So one of my favorites is actually this one, because it's transporting a car. That's a Chinese smuggler, because there are very high import tariffs for cars in China, for foreign cars. So it really makes sense to smuggle cars. So this is a go-fast boat. You can see like 5 big engines in the back, one dude driving, one car is the good, and it looks as if there's shit in the car. You know, I mean, optimization. And those boats are really fast. So they're like 80 and more kilometers an hour fast on the sea. A great way to kill yourself, by the way. And this is a go-fast boat that went from Morocco to Spain. So this is a mixture of hashish and cocaine, actually, because it's one of the big cocaine routes. And what you have here is that's a radar, because they're basically looking for other boats, which is important because between Morocco and Spain, you have the Strait of Gibraltar, and it's a big parking lot for ships. And when you're at that speed, at night, you really don't want to run into an oil tanker. So they have radar, so they can plan their routes. And those go-fast boats are often one-time use. So they're used from going from A to B. They're crashed onto the beach. Then you have like 4 or 5 people on the boat. They are for intercept, so if the police catches them on the water, they're just there to throw the shit into the water. And then when they reach the beach with the goods, you have like 50 people coming out of the woods, grab the stuff, and disappear again. So that is how go-fast smuggling works. And it's really efficient. And it's today it's the most efficient and secure way of smuggling. That's 150,000 about. Yeah, that's disposable. I mean, this year is probably something like 5 million worth of goods. Cost of business, you know. Yeah, it's a stamp, basically. But as you know, the Irish are cheap. So what the Irish do is they have this boat sitting in the harbor for multiple use. So as a customs officer, you're going through the harbor and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 motors for a fisherman. Sounds plausible to me. Or you're Chinese, and Chinese means you're not making any jokes. So what you build is this thing. My thing doesn't work anymore. This is a stealth, armored, go-fast boat. It's not a joke. This thing has a very low profile. It has those angled sides. It is actually painted with graphite. It's, I can't remember, something like 60 kilometers an hour fast. And it's armored, because the main method of taking down go-fast boats is to shoot at them, to shoot at the motors. So you have a helicopter, goes over the boat, and then you have a 50 cal, and that is how you switch off a go-fast boat. With that thing, no way, it's armored. And this is for transporting cars, again. You know, it's basically a car ferry, illegal. 4 cars fit into that. And it was actually captured in the harbor, because outside they could never get it. Okay, drags and parasites. On the top left, you see a Colombian, I think a Colombian policeman. And in the background, you have one of those semi-submersibles, but in the foreground, the big blue thing. You would put your goods into that, then you have a couple of divers. You go under one of those big ships and attach it from the bottom. And then they carry it over the Atlantic for you. And then in the destination harbor, you would have divers disconnecting it, and that's how you do it. That's the Mexicans. Right side is Spanish people. You know, different design, but it's basically doing the same thing, and both got caught. The Colombians got caught before they used it, the Spanish after they used it. Colombians, no loss of goods. Spanish, nice bricks in the background there. Market opportunity. So, now everybody says, of course, hey, in reality, why should we care about this big-time smuggling? We have the postal system. You know, you all heard about darknet markets and how secure and safe and awesome they are, and you just order it to your home and get high. Let's talk about postal system. So number one, the postal system has public routing, which means that you need to have an address where you receive it. And most people are not very good at having a second mailbox. You know, most people on darknet markets actually order to their home. And then they're scared when the darknet market gets busted, you know? Then the second thing is that the modern postal system, like when you look past the little yellow or red post boxes, is actually a machine, and it's a high-tech machine. So one of the things is fingerprinting and parcel ID. This is what the right side is for. I'm going to read it and then translate it. Our fingerprint technology makes use of the fact that no 2 mail pieces or parcels look exactly alike. Optical characteristics such as surfaces, stamps, and logos are recorded along with the mail piece's size, volume, and weight. Now the interesting part. The image-based identification technology thus recognizes a mail piece or parcel throughout the entire process chain. The image can be used for in-hub, that is like in the sorting facility, and cross-border, you know, breaking the law, as well as third-party, read intelligence agencies, parcel tracking. This is from the official sales document of a Siemens parcel sorting machine. So what they actually do is, there are 2 ways. So number one is, Toshiba uses a little printer, so you can always see who sorted your stuff, you know? So, in a Toshiba machine, you have a little UV ink barcode printed on it. Because they print this barcode on it as soon as the parcel or letter enters the system, and then they track that barcode from A to B. If you're a Siemens machine victim, you don't see anything, because they keep this database of every single mail piece processed by their systems. What does that allow you? For example, if you're randomly finding a darknet letter, like a drug shipment, what you do is you go to the database and say, give me every piece that looks similar. So using the same kind of stamps, same stamp position, same paper, same weight, whatever. And then you get these pieces, shown. But in addition to those pieces, you actually know on which sorting queue it entered. The sorting queue is determining which post box that piece was picked up from. And you know the position in the sorting queue, which means you have a rough estimate of the time when it was put into the post box. So what this allows you to do is to actually figure out all the shipments from a certain darknet dealer in a relatively easy way. And then you map them on a heat map. So basically you have a map of the environment, and then you say, okay, this post box had so many of this last week, this one had so many of this, other week, so you have this heat map. And then you can analyze that heat map and actually make predictions about the next mailbox being used, or even the location of where the shipper actually operates from, so his office, basically. And that's a technique that has been used against serial criminals for over 50 years. Heat mapping is extremely efficient. And randomizing a heat map is extremely costly because cost plays a role and people are lazy. Most darknet dealers are unable to do that. So they get away with luck, not because the postal system is interesting. So what you do, as soon as you kind of know what letterboxes will be used in the future, you set up surveillance, many things. We'll talk about them a little bit later, I think. Plus, you go through the list of all people having priors in the same area for a similar offense. And that basically means the only reason why a lot of darknet dealers are not caught is because the police is actually overwhelmed. It's not because the method is secure. It's because the police has other shit to do. That's it. Postal system, not very secure. It's what's the motto of this year? Digital totality? That is digital totality. What other risks do exist? You have this X-ray and backscatter systems that you know from the airport for naked scanners, basically. You walk through them, and then there's this little picture of a stick figure. That is what they see, basically, essentially. X-rays look for density, so they're able to differentiate, for example, between dense and less dense materials, or metallic, not metallic materials. And backscatter can be actually used to get a sense of the material in the sense, is it organic or inorganic, for example. And they do that with whole trucks and containers and whatever, and then in the middle, or the second from the bottom, what you see there is that somebody tried to stash a different good. And they got caught because they forgot that you have to stash it on all sides if you want to hide it. Then, of course, you have dogs. Dogs are not just used against drugs, but against money and electronics. And so the X-ray machines and backscatter machines don't give you a three-dimensional image. But they basically give you something like a surface area. So it's basically a shadow that you're seeing. And what these people here did, like the 1, 2, and 3 is from one car. It's mirrored, actually. And what you can see on the bottom one, all the goods look similar. But on the top one, you can see here that the pattern of the goods is a different one. It doesn't look similar to these ones. And that means there are different goods in there. So, but if you stash it on all sides with the same concealment good, it kind of looks the same. And they didn't do that. I heard. Okay, dogs. Dogs are not just used against drugs, they're used against money, they're used against electronics and COVID and stuff. Dogs are highly efficient. They're basically the best tool for breaking into ant smuggling networks. So the dog in the bowels of the airport looking, well, sniffing at all the bags is probably one of the most efficient tools. Because dogs don't think, they're just happy to play. And they don't get tired that easy. I mean, they get tired, but they don't get bored when they smell cocaine. So, then you have this whole issue of tracking. Today, everything is tracked. You know, tracking is a big thing. So AIS is the tracking method for boats. So the regulations for how big your boat may be. Before you need a tracker is going down all the time. So canoes will have trackers sooner or later. ADSB is active flight radar. So it's basically a little box that sends out the position and number of the plane and stuff like that. And this stuff can be received, and it's received not just by traffic control, but it's also received by police and private security companies and so on and so on. And then you can throw a little bit AI and ML on it to classify the behavior of vessels and say this is likely a smuggling vessel or this is a fisherman. So then pick up surveillance and trackers. The police often knows who is sending stuff, but it's still legal, especially when it comes to money, until it crosses the border. So what often happens is that the police stakes out a potential smuggler, puts trackers under the cars, and just waits for the cars to cross the border. And that is how they got these 1.5 million euros from Netherlands to Germany 2 weeks ago. That is like a standard method. Then body language. Body language is this thing. You might be able to conceal your stuff, but concealing your emotions is something different. And if you risk a few years in prison or losing 500,000 in coke, then you're stressed and stuff like that. So a lot of smugglers actually make sure that the people that carry their stuff don't actually know that they're carrying. So it's one of the risky things in certain countries. Don't give your luggage to the hotel for storage, because there are a lot of gangs that are specialized in opening your luggage, like the empty luggage, put shit in there, put a tracker in there, and then when you go back to Czech Republic, Germany, whatever, you have those nice people in a car following you home to retrieve their goods. So, and they do that to beat body language, basically. Route heat and computers. Certain goods come from certain places and the consumers are in different places. And there are only a limited number of routes between them. So what police does is every time they find something, they put that into a database. And this database with all the information, when did they find what, from on what vessel, and so on, is constantly analyzed. And out of that, the police and intelligence agencies actually learn which routes are used by smugglers. And that is something that gets better and better. So the time between the establishing of a new route and police actually shutting it down by controlling every single shipment is getting shorter and shorter. And the other big thing they really like is infiltrating organizations, because when it comes to wholesale drug shipments, for example, almost all of them are either completely random finds or leaks. Like somebody gets infiltrated into an organization, leaks the information, or somebody gets infiltrated in another organization that knows about that shipment of a competitor, and then it gets leaked. So that is actually how most of the big shipments are found. It's by leaking or infiltration. And then digital intercept, if you know the news, you have those secure phones for criminals, EncroChat, Phantom Secure, etc. You break into them, you learn everything about smuggling that you as a police officer in training want to know. So, what about the future? What time is it actually? Oh, fuck. Do you have time? Any other? Okay. Sorry, I'm really sorry. Last mile. So we know the postal system is kind of risky because of the receiver identifiability, etc. So one of the things that is done when there's a lot of surveillance pressure or the postal system doesn't work is using drop gangs. So drop gangs is this, instead of shipping a letter, you hide the goods in a certain location and then give the customer the location to pick it up. This is relatively big in Russia, the Balkans, parts of Asia. It's coming into the West right now a little bit. And it's actually in those countries where it is established, it almost completely replaced the postal-based darknet markets. Then when you look at Berlin, for example, or London or whatever, roving drops is the method. So it's AKA cocaine taxi. You know, you call a number, you say, I want the stuff, and then you have this car coming either directly to you or coming close by, establishing a dead drop that only holds for a few minutes. The car leaves, they call you again and say it's under the bench. And that is really hard to battle, actually, especially if you're using car sharing, etc., to distribute the goods. Then, one thing, drone drops. That sounds funny. It's actually something that is happening a lot in Latin America and in Asia. And that is basically, they have this Mavic Air, I forgot the name. So not the smallest Mavic drone, but one bigger. They actually have an accessoire that you can buy to drop goods. It's actually on Amazon. And it's good enough for a few ounces of product. So what you can do is, you fly over the customer, you press a button on your remote, and it drops the goods. It protects you as a merchant. Okay, so what this all moves to is that there's a separation in the ordering process. The ordering today is basically all cryptocurrencies plus social media and instant messenger. Instagram is really important for drug dealing. Telegram, super important. Twitter is, like, when it comes to French drug dealers, Twitter is very fine at all. And then you have drops for the last mile. So why do you do that? You have lower infiltration risk, so it's much harder to get a dealer and then jump up in the command chain. Tracking is much harder than in the postal system. So there's no record that you can access. You leak less intelligence, but there is this issue of new surveillance laws coming. So one of the big things for why they want into messengers is actually to beat the black market. So a lot of these anti-crypto laws and fingerprinting for media files is actually about this. You know, they all say it's about child porn, but it's actually easier to detect marijuana on a picture than child porn with AI. And that is kind of what is coming there. And then you have this whole issue that the police is learning as well. So you have a lot of anti-drone laws coming, so bigger laws, drones that are usable become illegal. And you have stuff like automatic license plate recognition to detect roving dealers. You know, so you put a few of those recognition systems at the street corners, Then you order your drugs, and you do that 20 times, and sooner or later you know the car that is delivering it. And all of these methods require smart dealers. And there are not that many smart dealers out there. But the few smart dealers that exist, they're upgrading their shit as well. So what do you do as an advanced cypherpunk dealer these days? Remember, this is a performance art. I'm not making any suggestions. So number one is most drug deals, especially when it comes to bigger stuff, the receivers and the senders want to establish control over the environment, and they do that by spotters. Spotters are people. They're sitting in the cafe only with a cell phone for all day, and they're just watching the street, or they're sitting on a rooftop, or they're driving around with their little motorbike all day. So if you're in a border town and you see those people that really have nothing else to do than watch, those are spotters. And they basically, as soon as they see strangers or the police or whatever, they call up the chain and say, hey, here's police. And that is how they control the environment. Now, spotters are upgrading. So in the past, spotters would whistle or shout. Then they got cell phones. Then they got instant messaging. And today they have night vision systems as well. So you have those people controlling the pod area. Then all those tracking systems for ships and planes and whatever can of course be used by the smugglers as well. So what you have today is you have this nerd sitting in the corner with an SDR and checking where all the police helicopters are and checking where all the Coast Guard boats are. Then, if you're really asking for trouble, you want to identify all the motor vehicles of the police. And automatic license plate recognition is something that you can do yourself because you can download the software from GitHub. So what people do is they have those little Raspberry Pis with a camera, ALPR software on it, and they put that on trees or something else around police stations. If you do that long enough, you know which license plates are police, undercover or not. And then you put license plate recognition around your hot zones again, like your headquarters or whatever. Whenever you see a certain frequencies of